Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of What They Don't Tell You. I'm your host, Jacob, along with the other host,
Aiden, and we're here to bring you our perspective on news, facts, culture, and what we believe to be true about them. Welcome back.
Alright guys, in today's episode we got 4 topics we're going to be running down. We're going to be talking about the teacher, Lucy Martinez, and the backlash that she's getting, rightfully so. We're also going to be talking about gerrymandering. Now, we're going to be talking about gerrymandering and how it's going to be affecting California. We're also going to be talking about the 2030 census, and we're going to end it off with Joe Rogan on the No Kings protests and just giving our thoughts on the No King protests in general. So, Aiden, you ready for this one?
Ready as I can be.
All right. So, I want to talk about first, I'm going to show a video, and then we will talk about what this has to do.
Hey! You ever heard of Census, you fat ass?
With a marker. Alright guys, so you saw a woman and she was putting her hands in a gun sign and putting it to her neck, obviously mocking Charlie Kirk's death, and this woman was later to be found out to be Lucy Martinez, a elementary school teacher in Chicago. So everybody is now blaming her for family, like getting DMs or whatever it is, all that stuff. The school she worked for actually deleted all of their social accounts and website and stuff. So Aiden, what do you think about this?
I mean, we talk about this every single podcast, but we got to address some of the news. I think, honestly, when I watch everyone, I think Benny says it best. When people tell you who they are, you got to believe them. And he's said that many times, and I personally agree with him. They've shown who they are, and to my understanding, Jacob, and maybe you can help me clarify this, it sounds like that school that she's working for responded and said that, we have received messages that could potentially be in the form of threats and want to protect our teachers. I understand that, but are they going to, and maybe you have a better understanding of this from me, perhaps I haven't responded, are they going to do anything about her enrollment in the school and potentially radicalizing children, because we do not know who this person is and what she is teaching to these kids?
I don't think they've actually made a statement on her specifically. They have said that they have gotten threats from people to the school, and I really think that there's one way to handle those threats is fire her.
Yeah.
Right? Why, if you're trying to keep her on, because first off, we can see that just the woke evil in the schools, if they're wanting to keep her on, if they're supporting her or whatever they are. But if they're saying that if they haven't made a statement and they're still keeping her on, they're trying to protect her and why are you threatening us? There's a reason. It's because you have crazy teachers teaching our children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't want to become like the left and have these threats made to these people. And hopefully there hasn't been any threat of violence. I'm sure there has, because we have still, I'm sure, some crazies out there, of which I do not associate whatsoever. But that being said, you can understand the anger behind this. This is someone that's teaching children. This is someone that's influencing the next generation. Not a whole lot can be said in her defense, to be honest with you. I would hope that the school makes a statement. What do you have to think? Because this was in light, I think, of the No Kings protest. What do you have to say about kind of the mentality of these protesters and potentially the demographics? Because we've seen a lot of very old individuals in this, which we'll get to later. But I'd like to just kind of hear your thoughts on whether or not Gen Z is taking an active part on this, whether or not the previous generations have been more affected, and if you have any thoughts on why, essentially, older generations rather than the younger generations are adopting this mentality.
I think we've talked about it multiple times. We're seeing a revival in Gen Z, going to church and looking for something more than just what the media is pushing, right? But I think, and we're going to dive a little more into the No Kings protest in a second and a little bit later in the episode, but I think the reason that we're seeing this older demographic is because they think they're like, oh, time to get back to my glory days of protesting in the streets and making a difference, and they don't have anything better to do with their lives. You know what I mean?
So
they either didn't have children because that's what the media is pushing, or nobody likes their children don't like them because of how they are. You know what I mean? So they don't have anything to look forward to or do, so they're going to protest in the streets and pretend to kill Charlie Kirk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, idle hands are the devil's workshop. That makes complete sense. So would you say then that perhaps their trust in the media over time has kind of brought about this sense of they just trust it blindly, right? And so when it's continuing to tell them, we see a lot of mainstream media is mostly left-leaning or at the very least biased one way or another. I mean, even Fox News is biased conservatively, right? Would you say that it's their complete trust in the news? What would you say, like 24-hour news cycle came about and they had this kind of constant influx? They were used to trusting the news, perhaps not a lot of established critical thinking that we usually think we're going to see in an older generation. And so it's very odd.
I think it comes down to, again, the lack of critical thinking and almost they want to be dictated. They want to be in a communist society to where it's like they don't have to think for themselves. They don't have to stand up for what they believe in. They just want to be told what to do and follow the Trump's over.
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. We don't like him. That's the word around here.
Any particular reason why you don't like him?
No clue at all. I'm just going with everybody else saying.
Oh yeah, so you just saw the video that was played, and it was on the street on the No Kings protest, and there was a guy that got asked, like, why is he here? What is he protesting against? And he called Trump the B word, and then said that he was like, I don't know, I'm just here, you know. And it shows that it's like they don't even know what they're doing here. They just want something to be mad about. They just want and probably half of them are getting paid to be in the streets, you know. And so I think it's funny to see that it's like they don't care what it is. They just want to be a part of they just want to be dictated. They want to be told what to do. Don't want to have to think for themselves. And do you have any thoughts on that, Aiden?
I mean, I think it was Galileo that said essentially the reasoning of a single individual may be better than the following of a group, right? And I think the actual quote is here. I can actually read it off my notes. He says in questions of science, but really it's in questions of anything. In questions of science, the authority of 1,000 is not worth the humble reasoning of a single individual. So if you are reasoning correctly and virtuously, as, you know, the old philosophers thought, then if you're reasoning that way, then you're reasoning in accordance with the universe. And so you should be doing your best to be very critical in the way that you view everything, and that way you can come to hopefully what is the best possible conclusion from that evidence. That evidence for Trump and the reasons to hate Trump when they say that they don't know is a lack of any kind of critical thinking in this. As we've talked about many times, they're not reasoning correctly. They're not choosing to reason correctly. Someone is reasoning for them, as you mentioned. What do you have to say in regards to kind of the power of crowds and maybe, and this doesn't have to be factually grounded, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. What are the grounds for why that kind of groupthink is so easy to fall into, and maybe some of that influence on yourself as well?
I think it's like a lot of people, it's almost not fear, it's almost not force, almost bullying in a sense, you know. Like, oh, we have so many people, we're yelling and screaming, we have these megaphones. I think Charlie dealt with this a lot. It's like we're not even gonna let you state your opinion, and we don't even want to give ours. We don't want to hear yours. We just want to yell our mottos, our chants in your face until we kill you or agree with you, you know, or like you agree with us, you know what I mean? So I think it's like it's almost the bully factor.
You're conforming, right?
Yeah,
you want to conform to it so that you're not maybe put in danger. We see the dangerous element of the radical left. Or perhaps it also comes down to just the same reason, you know, high school kids our age hang out with certain people, want to have a certain face, put on a certain mentality. And then also, what would you have to say, because there's some evidence to suggest this, with people that, you know, they say, that guy said he hates Trump, or there's other ones, and perhaps very similar to this man, you know, that say, I don't know why, but that's the general consensus, as this kid kind of mentioned. That's the general consensus of the people here. That's not even saying them. That's saying of the people here. And a lot of people would point to organizations that pay these people to protest. There's a lot of people that, you know, so a lot of those signs that they're holding up aren't even handmade. They're handed out by people that, you know, we could point to a lot of institutions. I'm not a big fan of getting shot, but we'll throw those institutions out anyway. So like the Rockefeller Foundation, you know what I mean? Like Rockefeller Foundation is a big one. I think that's Soros pays for, you know, those people to go protest, and we see a lot of issues with that, obviously. But there's a good chance that this kid doesn't know and he's getting paid to be here.
Right.
So we don't even know that all these people are even choosing that. They just want to make a little extra cash. So what are your kind of thoughts on paying people to protest? Do you think that's ethical in any way or has any place in American institution? Or do you feel that, you know, we should be going further away from this, separating ourselves from these ideas that we can pay people to protest for our idea? Do you think that's generally immoral, or do you think that does have some kind of place because of the capitalist society that we've created?
I think it's almost like buying followers in a sense. It's like they don't really care what you're doing or what you're posting. They're just there to get paid. And I think, again, that's just kind of the world we live in, right? It's like however you can make a few bucks, you're gonna do it.
Sure.
But the reason I don't think it's necessarily ethical or moral, it's because it's like you don't like some of these people you're taking advantage of, you know? You're not
sure.
actually, they don't know necessarily what you're really promoting, what you're really putting out there. And then we can see that like these people are getting caught up. Like when I first see a video, if I'm just scrolling and I see the video we just played a couple minutes ago,
Yeah.
I would say, oh, that guy just hates Trump. That's my only thought. And then if I watch it, I'm like, oh, I know why he's getting paid. He doesn't even know what he's saying. But like my initial thought is, oh, he hates this side, or he hates this thought or this agenda. And so now, as someone that might support this agenda, I'm already going to have a negative impact or feeling on this guy. And so I feel like that can hurt people that don't know what they're doing, that could be possibly getting taken advantage of. And if you know what you're fully doing, then okay, sure, whatever, go make a few bucks, however you want to do it. But I think that's how I see it.
So you would say no, there should be morality over just make a few quick bucks. Like so you don't see fault necessarily on the end of the person receiving the dollars. You see fault on the person giving the dollars out to support an agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay,
I
that's
think
a fair assessment. I can definitely
that's an argument
appreciate
we can
that.
make with a lot of things that we've seen in the media, and I think that's a conversation for a different day
Yes,
that we can talk about.
I think I like your ignorance take on that. It's an ignorance of the people receiving the money. They just want to make a few extra bucks, and it's being taken advantage of. That's
I
understandable.
think it's always both sides are definitely
We're both guilty.
responsible.
Yes.
But I think it's in this context, and I think it's hard because we always have to look at each situation differently because people are going to bring this up in other topics that we talk about. But I think you always have to take a look at the situation, and then I also think that it's definitely a two-way side because we see that this brainwashing happens all the time, and so it's definitely two ways. But you can definitely see more on the join the big crowd and make a few dollars, especially when people are just trying to survive and get a lunch.
No, that makes total sense. I do agree for the most part. I think people are still responsible for the money they receive and the actions they have as a society, but it does play into a lot of the ignorance we talk about. As a society, we should be promoting, again, virtue ethics out of anything because and establishing that there's a set moral order, because otherwise you have people that are very, very ignorant to that and do not live by those virtues, which means that they're going against essentially the set order of the universe to which they can receive justice through that potentially. Now, that being said, we should feel some pity for them because they do not understand fully the consequences of their actions. And we should be holding potentially. You can't really have capitalism without morality sprinkled in. And I think that's what people don't fully understand. Capitalism is incredible, but that system only works so long as you have a virtuous society. It just happens to also negate a lot of the unvirtuous things that happen, whereas something like communism is very easily turns into, socialism turns into communism, I should say. It's a better answer to that. So if you would like to, if you have anything else to say, any final statements here regarding these incidents before we move on?
I just think that, again, bring it back to the teacher thing, right? It's like you gotta make sure what you're posting and what you're doing is going to reflect you and your employer. And does that mean that you lose your job because of that? Maybe. If you really believe in what you believe, then sure, go right ahead. That's personally if you really think that Charlie was a fascist or whatever they're trying to call him nowadays, then sure, go right ahead. But you're gonna live with your actions for your consequences. So
Your actions. That makes a lot of sense. It's unfortunate to see the ignorance of people, and we can feel pity through ignorance. However, we also cannot tolerate. By the same propositions that we have about virtue, we cannot tolerate evil either, and so it is unfortunate to see how many people pander to the evil. Now, to move on, we want to talk about some kind of complex topics to a lot of potentially people who don't understand the redistricting process, but particularly California, if we want to get into that, and if I may speak on it for a moment. California has a new proposition in the legislature, which is Proposition 50. Now, to fully understand this, we have to understand what gerrymandering is. Gerrymandering, I like to call it gerrymandering because the original person was actually named Gary and was eventually turned into a soft G. So if I say that is my own nerd politician inside joke. So, that being said, gerrymandering is essentially the redrawing the redistricting lines, particularly for legislature, that affect voting. So there's a few different forms of this, but it's essentially where it favors one side. So normal redistricting is a regular process that happens roughly every 10 years. And it's to ensure essentially fair drawn lines so that representation is somewhat equally distributed. But gerrymandering is where those districting lines through two different forms called cracking and packing is favors one party over the other. So in California right now, there is an independent committee that is made up of citizens with an equal distribution of Republican, Democrat, and Independent that redraw the lines every 10 years or whatever, and this was actually put in place by, I believe, Arnold Schwarzenegger, which we'll talk about in a minute, who promoted this. And the idea is that it really returns power back to the people. The people decide redraw the lines in all fairness. They are, on essentially even terms with each other and redraw those lines to the best of their, they follow federal and state regulation to redraw those lines, as should happen. However, what it would happen with Proposition 50 is they would return districting to the legislature. Right. And so the legislature, which is majority Democrat in this case, would then choose to redraw those lines and could put it in favor of blue districts, right? So they would redraw it to make blue districts. If by these forecastings are correct, then it would take out a large part of the eastern side of California and switch it blue
which would hurt big time
the Republicans in that area. So I'll explain pretty quickly. Fracking is essentially spreading voters of a particular type among a lot of different districts so that they don't have a large enough vote to get their people in place, right? And so by cracking district, you essentially split it, and so that the voters, so let's say there's red voters really compact in a single area, they have a large amount of votes that they could get into a singular area. Well, now by splitting them, potentially you could allow for their vote not to count for nearly as much because you split that large accounted voter base in half. And so you have to take it by districts and where the majority of Republicans and Democrats are. Now, packing is different because it actually concentrates a lot of voters into one area, and that means that other surrounding areas will have less power. Let's say there's a lot of Republicans, they move them into a single area, concentrate their votes by splitting the districting lines that way, and then their votes concentrated, so they might get that area, but a lot of the area around it they're not going to get. Or their votes are so exceeding what they need to win anyway that those votes are simply waste and doesn't matter. So it's all around trying to get as many votes not to count on one side. And that's why gerrymandering is so dangerous. This goes all the way back to Patrick Henry and James Madison, I believe, where I'm not sure fully on this. I don't have my necessarily facts fully straight, but Patrick Henry actually tried to use gerrymandering as a way to oust James Madison from his position. So it's very dangerous, and Arnold Schwarzenegger has called in condemnation of it, saying that it's returning it to the central government, and it's all because people hate Trump. Interesting statement. I appreciate what he's trying to say, but we just need to be very careful with this.
Can we say
very
something
careful.
real quick?
Yes.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was a Democrat.
He was a
when
Democrat.
He was in office.
I don't always respect his views, but I can understand this. And I respect him as an individual because he's a lot more conservative-leaning liberal, I would say. He seems to be much more middle grounded. He went, I don't know if you guys remember, but he has made some extensive statements on illegal immigration, saying that when he's an immigrant, right, and he came over the legal way, and what does he talk about? He talks about being a guest, right? And so he has got some good, a guest essentially in another country where you're expected to return something to the country too, just like all the population. And so we can really appreciate what he's saying there. And I appreciate what he's saying here. He's being honest, and he desired to return power essentially to the people through this independent committee. And I don't have too much more to say to this, but it could be very bad. It could be very bad for the Republican voters of this area. It could heavily sway to the Democrats. We know that the other governor is very concerned with this. The other potential governor, I should say, the Republican one, has actually went on the Charlie Kirk show to speak in condemnation of Gavin Newsom and essentially the Democratic plan to take over California. So very, very dangerous. Now, Jacob, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this really quick. What do you think about this whole redistricting process, but essentially what is becoming just gerrymandering in California through Proposition 50?
Again, like you said, I think and you explained it really well. It's not even that they're wanting the votes. It's almost like I might be going down, but you're going down with me for those votes that are missing out on, right? They're just wanting to take it away from their opponent, and I think this could hurt the Republicans big time. California's a big state for the presidential election. Yeah, and so I think that could hurt in a lot of ways. I don't think we could have more Gavin Newsom or any the people like him.
In the legislature now, too. Legislature is the most dangerous, according to the founders.
Yeah, and
Congress.
so I think that's going to be big for passing bills, passing laws,
Absolutely.
everything like that. It's going to hurt if that happens. I don't even know, can Trump do much about that?
Trump shouldn't
how
really
much
have
does
any
he-
power in the states
No,
to that degree.
I don't think he should. We'll have to see. I think it's going to be bad if they figure this out. That doesn't work for Republicans. When the presidential race comes back around, this could hurt J.D. Vance if that's our Republican runner. As of right now,
Yes.
I believe that is the plan.
We're
But
kind of all made assumptions, but I'm sure that's the case.
yeah. I hope that they figure something out, at least even a little bit. This could, whenever they, like you said, if they take out I just think if we take out too many of the Republicans, we're not gonna have
Absolutely.
some fun.
In California, that's already a blue state. It's already bad enough as it
Mm-hmm.
is. And if you notice, they have the highest tax rates. They have the most socialistic living principles. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, Charlie himself spoke very, very heavily against that and understood that people are leaving those states. Now, we'll get into that, why that matters in a second. But the last thing I do want to add is that with the federalistic principles, because Jacob made a very important point here, and what I do want to warn maybe conservatives against too is that I like Trump. I appreciate everything he's doing as a president. Now, I do want to... This is a societal mindset. This is not his fault. But a societal mindset is that, he's going to rescue us from everything. We tend to look at him, as this higher thing that's going to rescue us, where he's going to do everything. Really, it's still society that has to fix things. And so we can't just be like, Trump will fix it. That doesn't allow reliance on government. I don't think he's a bad president that's trying to take ultimate power by any means. But as a society, I do warn against that mindset that, he's just going to save us from everything. As a society, we save ourselves from things, and that's the way that government has always operated the best. It enforces the rules of the game that we play, which is capitalism, as Milton Friedman said, but it does not interfere so far as to control what we are trying to do. Now, it controls a lot more than it used to, and that's a big issue. But that being said, we need to fix things on our own, which means as this legislator, as these people that you're electing, you have to understand where their values are and where they're going to lie. The federalistic principles also, as kind of Jacob pointed out there, are that state is separate. The states came first. So the state governments came first. And in a lot of ways, they have more and should have more power collectively than the federal government in the sense that they represent the people best and their common interests in those states. So the federalist principles are the states came first and that the federal government comes in lieu of the states. Another thing that we have to keep in mind is that the founders saw the Congress, the legislature, not the executive branch, not the judicial branch is the most powerful, but they saw the legislature as most likely to overstep its bounds. So that means your House and your Senate are most likely to overstep its bounds into other states. Now, there's paper checks and balances, and there's essentially realized checks and balances where, because the founders, especially in the Federalist Papers, did not believe that paper boundaries were sufficient. They had to have essentially built-in boundaries into the government, and that means splitting up the legislature. That's why we have a House and a Senate, not just a Senate. But we do need to be careful of looking at what they're trying to do in the legislature, because as the founders point out, the legislature has the most power to override other areas of government and tends to overstep its bounds the most frequently. And so we need to be very careful of that, very, very mindful, especially as the Democrats push for this in California. Now, what I want to talk about is the amount of people that have left California, because if we want to jump over to the 2030 census that is coming up, then we get into a whole nother area. Because if you guys will notice, and we'll pull up can we pull up this map? We can look at this map here. So as you guys probably well know, the Senate does not change based on population, but as the founders decreed would be the best for a Republican nation, the House does change based on population. So if you'll look here, what's very interesting is California is going to be losing a lot of seats based on the new census forecasting. The House does lose seats based on population. The founders saw this as a good way to prevent tyranny, to prevent the legislature from becoming too powerful. We won't get into that today, maybe some other time. However, if we look, California is going to be... All right. Guys, Utah, Idaho, and Arizona are all gaining a few seats. Looks like +1 based on this map. Now, look at Oregon and California.
By the way.
This is projections. I know it might not be outplayed. We'll see.
It might
we'll see based on the
fluctuate
census.
a little bit by
But
2030, so...
Yeah, well, who knows, right? But Oregon and California are losing seats. Why do you think that is, guys? I'm not saying that these states, they might have just gained an increased population based on, who knows, right? They could be a lot of people born, a lot of whatever, aging voters finally being able to vote and whatnot. But overall, this to me, This looks like we've seen an exodus of people from California moving to those east to those states that might be at least slightly more conservative, and thereby they're gaining seats. Now, I also don't know what that's going to look like based on the illegal immigration that's happened to this country. I don't know what's going to look like with some of the corruption and fraud that could come of that based on population. Hopefully, those things get taken care of, and we do not account for those people. But if it does, that could very well swing seat movements, which is very dangerous as well. We can get into that some other time. But otherwise, you guys, those states, and Minnesota's losing some where I'm from. I think they're losing one. And then we've seen an increase in other states. Texas, I think, is gaining quite a few because people are moving. And I'm not saying that's always why. It could also be, again, I hope it's not just because of illegal immigration. Like, that's what makes me nervous. But let's say it's all U.S. registered citizens. Yeah, Jacob, you take it.
Can I say something real quick? I don't mean to interrupt you.
No,
this is from portside.org, and this map was actually of 2023. This was one of the latest ones I could find.
Yeah.
So December 25th, 2023, so actually Christmas Day, this was released. So about a year ago, almost 2 years ago. So it's probably fluctuated a little bit, especially with all the ICE integrations. They're going to probably fluctuate a little bit, but just kind of an idea. I think it's still going to stay remotely the same.
It takes quite a few. It takes quite a bit of population to make these change.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty accurate as of 2025. Now, in 5 years when this actually takes place, will it be the same? Probably not. I'd have to say maybe give or take 1 or 2 each. But as of now, that's pretty accurate. So, Aiden, if you want to continue, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're all good. So we see the loss and gain of several states here. Again, interesting. Doesn't even mean they're going to be Republican necessarily, but we see it in a few conservative states. Now, I'll grant you that there's some that aren't necessarily what we'd call conservative states, either based on potential forecasting for the next few election cycles. But that being said, pretty big deal for the country. Actually, we'll see what happens when the census actually rolls around. But as of right now, we see a few dangerous left hooks by the left, and so we gotta be able to duck and roll here and hit back a little bit, give power back to the people. So guys, get involved in your communities. The government should rely on society to actually fix themselves. And so guys, let's get to work and not let essentially people like Charlie's sacrifice go to waste. Let's create a society and a country where our children do better than we do, because that's all we can really ask for. I want my kids to be able to, own a cabin and sit on a pontoon when they want to. I want them to be able to go on vacations and live the kind of, I don't want to say that's just the American dream, but, be able to support themselves and have those good families that we have all looked back and been very proud of as a country.
Charlie's kids are probably going to have a tough time. That's going to be pretty tough.
Yeah.
Better than their...
Yeah, that is true. Character-wise, that's tough.
That's a good thing, though.
Character-wise, that's tough. But I trust that everyone here I hope. My goal is that everyone that is listening to this, that everyone that isn't listening to this, that is truly American, wants to live by the American ideals, has that opportunity to improve their life beyond what their parents could even comprehend. That is the goal, and that is what we strive for. So, that being said, Jacob, do you want to take us into our next topic?
Yes, guys. So, this is our fourth and final topic for today. We really appreciate you guys for listening in. I just wanted to bring up a quick thing. We're going to talk about the No Kings protest a little more, just what this means, why everybody still has Trump derangement syndrome, even though we've talked about this 3 times already. And then we're also going to talk about what Joe Rogan said, a little funny clip from Joe Rogan, so let's do it. Alright, guys, so we've seen insane protests from the No Kings protest, basically protesting Trump. And again, I want to say,
for being a king. Super totalitarian.
Super.
Ruling with an iron fist.
Really bad. And we talked about this actually, I believe, one of our first episodes, 1 or 2, talking about, what our thoughts were on Trump's, if he took a 3rd term, what could this mean? Should he do it? How moral is it? All that stuff. We talked about that in a past episode, but he already stated he's not going to. That's the thing. So I don't get why. And then he just trolls people, bro. It's great because he just trolls them. He posts
he doesn't care,
posts, the AI stuff. He's like, I will rule. But and what are your thoughts on some of this protesting stuff and just in general how people are reacting?
Dude, I mean, we just kind of went over this, but it's crazy. Rogan, obviously, kudos to him, just saying they're all losers or feds. I mean, look, take that as offensively as you want. I'm just gonna be honest. If you're not thinking for yourself, I don't have too much to add to Rogan. Pretty much summed it up there. Our feds, yeah, and a lot of people, like we said, are probably getting paid to do this. So it's pretty much all across the board. It's not looking good for anyone. to be either a loser or a fed in one of these crowds isn't exactly a compliment. So shout out to Rogan here, because that's pretty dang funny.
Do you want to play the clip real quick?
I do. I want everyone to see this clip.
All right, I'll play it and then we can resume.
Sounds good.
All right, so you guys saw the clip. That was. I love Rogan, dude. He's just a goat.
Rogan just talks, dude. I'm glad he should have a lot of that kind of respect, because he's got good takes. He lets the people that come on talk and hear him out and see where they're at
on his show.
Dude,
bro.
He's a big name, man. I appreciate what he's been doing and the thinking he's had, because I'm just gonna be honest, guys, Rogan's a great example of what it can look like when you start to think for yourself and think critically. I mean, he's had these people on his podcast, and instead of just trying to promote his own agenda, having these own ideas, he listened to all of them and he internalized that, and you can see him internalizing it even in his podcast, and then he just kind of just speaks what the clear objective of what they're saying is. Like, okay, you think this, you think this, you think this, and then he's just like, okay, well now what's the actual truth behind this? And he's sought it out. He's made his own judgments. He's thought critically about everything that's been said to him. We've seen that he's been going to church recently and really kind of internalizing all those things and thinking through them, and that's why I should appreciate him, dude, because you can tell. If you ask that dude a question, and here's the biggest difference I see between liberals and conservatives, I hate to say it, I'm not saying it's always true, but if you ask a conservative a question, a conservative who's really critically thinking, who's putting their thoughts out there, they might take a second. They might take a second to answer that. They might think, okay, what's the implications if I say this? What's the implications if I say this? What's the implications if I say this?
Saying this?
But if you
every time, just spitting it out. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, a lot of times you'll see that, again, a lot of these left-wing people that argue with Charlie, that argue with a lot of these people, they're usually using the bully method again. Like we saw in the protests, and just really loud, quick to the point, calling you an idiot, whatever it is. Really pushing, just like not even giving it a chance, but like whenever you really see them contemplate what they're saying, who's going to see this, what's this going to mean to me, my family, you know what I mean? So it's like
absolutely
really thinking through how they come across whenever they give answers, and then giving a fully thought answer after they think about it. You know what I mean? So I think that's cool to see.
Yep. No, I 100% agree. Hopefully we can get virtue and care back into our education systems, that we see more people internalizing before they speak, because it's not. Look, I've never encountered someone who I've thought of as wise who speaks immediately. It's usually a carefully thought out response, and that's okay. If you take a second to respond to something, even in public speaking, and I prepare well before I do this. But I try to think before I speak, and I'm not good at it every single time. I'm not calling myself out as better. It's okay to pause. Really, it is. It's okay to pause. Think through what you're saying. Think through why you're justifying what you believe, right? Like, what are my justifications? How am I justifying this? Why is it true? What am I believing that's true, right? Before you open your mouth, strength of the tongue is a really big deal. James in the Bible talks about this, but it's true in just our modern world. If you think before you speak, you're much better off, and people are going to respect you for that. So never learn the virtue of patience and the virtue of thinking before you speak. And those things will automatically make our society 10 times better than it is right now. I guess I don't have too much more to add to that, Jacob, if you want to finish this off here.
I'll finish it off. I want to say one thing. It's like with Charlie, you'd say like everybody's going to be like, once we say all this, it's like, okay, think before you speak, whatever. This guy, and like sometimes he didn't always do that. He would always get right to the point. He's in an argument, right? He's done this a lot. He practices a lot.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not, but that doesn't mean he's not thinking. I'm just saying it's okay to pause.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to. Yeah, so I'm like, even if you don't think he is, he's fully thought out stuff before. He's already gone through every argument that he ever had before it happened. He's probably done it 20 times. So that's I'm just gonna say that, because I guarantee there's gonna be people that comment like, oh, what about Charlie Kirk? He always said blah, blah.
respond to it. Yeah.
Just
It happens when you're well read, though. That does.
Yes,
If you're
exactly.
well read and your brain is constantly trying to make connections in your head of, okay, how does this connect to this piece of information? What's the best case for my argument? It's all of a sudden those little responses become a lot easier. And that means
Exactly.
thinking through the question as it's being processed instead of just spitting out the first thing that comes to your head. All those different things built up, and being very well read makes a big impact in that. So I encourage you guys to read too, as I know Charlie Ward and these people that debate very intelligently and well. I appreciate you guys for being here. I don't think I have too much else to add. We're just grateful that you guys tune in to listen. You know, like, subscribe, please. We want to get a big audience. We want to be able to preach the truth to everyone that we possibly can. And we'll see you guys out there.
Yeah. Peace
Peace.
out. We'll see you next week.